What would you do if the leader meant to protect your community became the greatest danger to your family? This is the story of Anjali Sharma, a 14-year-old girl from Rampur, whose life took a tragic turn after her family sought help from the village head. The quiet village held a terrible secret, one that would change everything when it came to light. Stay with us to uncover a story of power, greed, and loss in a small Indian village. Welcome to True Crime Anatomy, where we bring you real stories from across the world. Stories that are unheard and unseen. We work every day to uncover and share the truth about the most shocking crimes. And if that's what you're here for, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode. Today, we take you to Rampur, a small, remote village in India, where life is quiet, simple, and ruled by tradition. It's the kind of place where everyone knows each other and where the village head, Raghunath Singh, held absolute power for decades. At 71 years old, Singh was seen as both a leader and a figure to fear. His word was law. But what started as a family's desperate attempt to save their livelihood ended in tragedy. Anjali Sharma, a 14-year-old girl full of promise, was the youngest daughter of a struggling farming family. Her parents, unable to repay a loan taken for their crop, found themselves caught in a web of threats and manipulation by Singh. What followed revealed more than just a debt. It uncovered the terrifying extent of Singh's control and the years of unchecked abuse he had inflicted on the village. By the end of this documentary, you will learn how the courage of one man's truth-telling exposed decades of hidden atrocities, forever changing Rampur and the lives of those who lived there. This is the story of Anjali Sharma, a story of greed, power, and the fight for justice. Rampur is a small, isolated village in rural India where life is simple but far from easy. The villagers rely on farming for survival, living off the land that has sustained them for generations. The Sharmas were one such family. They owned a small piece of farmland, just enough to grow crops to feed their family and sell a little extra at the market. It wasn't much, but it kept them going until the rains failed. That year, the monsoon came late, and when it did arrive, it wasn't enough. The crops withered in the dry heat, and the family faced a desperate situation. Like many others in the village, the Sharmas turned to Raghunath Singh for help. Singh, at 71, had been the village head for decades. To some, he was a figure of respect, the man who settled disputes and ensured order in the community. But to those who really knew him, Singh was a man driven by power and greed. He used his position not to protect the villagers, but to exploit their vulnerabilities. Lending money to struggling families was one of his many tactics. The terms were simple. He would lend generously, but if they couldn't repay on time, he would take their land, livestock, or whatever else he wanted. When the Sharmas borrowed money from Singh, they hoped to recover the loan after the harvest. But with the crop failure, repaying him became impossible. Singh, as usual, wasted no time in reminding them of their debt. He sent his men to visit the Sharmas regularly, pressuring them to pay. Each time they came, the family grew more fearful. Singh wasn't just any creditor, he was the most powerful man in the village. He controlled not only the land, but also the police and other authorities. Challenging him would be dangerous. For Singh, the Sharmas were just another family in a long list of people he had manipulated. He was a man who thrived on the struggles of others. Over the years, he had built his wealth by seizing the land and property of those who couldn't repay him. It wasn't just about money, it was about control. He used fear as a tool, ensuring that no one in the village would dare to question him. As the pressure mounted, the Sharmas tried to plead for more time. They visited Singh, explaining that the land was their only source of income. Losing it would mean losing everything: their home, their children's education, their ability to put food on the table. But Singh didn't care. To him, their struggles were an opportunity. During one of these meetings, Singh's attention shifted when they mentioned their youngest daughter, Anjali. Anjali Sharma was 14 years old, the youngest of 3 siblings, and the pride of her family. She was bright, hardworking, and determined to finish school. Her parents had high hopes for her. They believed she could escape the poverty that had trapped their family for generations. While her brothers worked alongside their father in the fields, 𝐸𝐵𝐵𝐵 spent her days studying and dreaming of a better future. For her, education was the key to breaking free. But Singh saw an opportunity in 𝐸𝐵𝐵𝐵. He proposed a different kind of arrangement to the Sharmas. If 𝐸𝐵𝐵𝐵 came to work in his household for 6 months, he would forgive the debt. He even promised to cover her school fees. "No one needs to know," he said, presenting it as a solution to all their problems. To him, this was a business transaction, a way to gain something more valuable than money. The Sharmas were horrified. The idea of sending their young daughter to live with Singh was unthinkable. They refused immediately, leaving his house in anger. But Singh wasn't used to hearing no. Over the next few weeks, his threats escalated. He reminded them of their debt and warned them of the consequences if they didn't comply. He had taken land from families before, and he made it clear he wouldn't hesitate to do it again. The family's resistance began to crack under the pressure. Singh's influence in the village was absolute. He had the power to ruin their lives completely, and they knew it. With no other options, the Sharmas made the heartbreaking decision to accept his proposal. They sat 𝐸𝐵𝐵𝐵 down and explained everything: the debt, Singh's demands, and their fears. It was a conversation filled with guilt and shame. Her parents tried to reassure her, saying it was only for 6 months and that it would save their family. 𝐸𝐵𝐵𝐵, though young, understood the weight of their situation. She agreed, not because she wanted to, but because she didn't see another way. The days leading up to 𝐸𝐵𝐵𝐵's departure were filled with a heavy silence. Her mother packed her belongings, carefully folding her clothes as tears streamed down her face. Her father avoided speaking to her, unable to face the guilt of what they were about to do. 𝐸𝐵𝐵𝐵, though scared, tried to stay strong for her family. She hugged her siblings goodbye and left the only home she had ever known to serve a man whose intentions she didn't fully understand. For Singh, this was routine. Over the years, he had taken many young girls into his household under similar arrangements. The villagers whispered about his behavior, but no one dared to speak openly. His wealth and connections ensured that any opposition was silenced. Singh's house, larger and more imposing than the rest of the village, became a place of fear for those who entered it. 𝐸𝐵𝐵𝐵's arrival was just another chapter in a long history of exploitation. When 𝐸𝐵𝐵𝐵 Sharma left her home and walked into Raghunath Singh's house, she didn't know what awaited her. To her parents, this was a desperate attempt to save their land, their income, and their future. They held on to Singh's promise to forgive the debt and pay for her education, believing that perhaps, despite the humiliation, it might offer 𝐸𝐵𝐵𝐵 a better life. But once the door closed behind her, the reality became clear. 𝐸𝐵𝐵's first days in Singh's household were filled with tasks that seemed small at first, but quickly grew overwhelming. She was expected to clean the house from top to bottom, serve meals, and attend to Singh's every demand. At 14, her body was not yet strong enough for such grueling work. But Singh didn't care. He was harsh, quick to criticize, and impossible to please. Soon the tasks became more degrading. Singh ordered 𝐸𝐵𝐵𝐵 to bathe him, something that filled her with fear and disgust. When she hesitated, he yelled, warning her that disobedience would bring consequences. Over time, the verbal abuse turned physical. If she didn't move quickly enough, or if something wasn't to his liking, he slapped her or threw objects in her direction. The longer she stayed, the more unbearable the situation became. 𝐸𝐵𝐵𝐵's nights were no escape. Singh forced her into his room, where the abuse continued in silence. She endured it because she felt she had no choice. She remembered the faces of her parents, their voices pleading with her to be strong for the family. That thought kept her going, even when the pain was too much. As the weeks went by, 𝐸𝐵𝐵𝐵 grew weaker. She worked long hours with little food or rest. Her spirit began to fade, and she stopped speaking unless spoken to. The only sign of life left in her was the faint hope that the 6 months would eventually end. But hope wasn't enough to shield her from Singh's growing cruelty. He began to drink heavily in the evenings, and his anger became more violent. After these nights, she often woke up with bruises that she hid from others in the household. After 2 months, Anjali couldn't take it anymore. One evening, when Singh ordered her to his room, she refused. She stood at the door, trembling but firm. For the first time, she said, "No." Singh, unaccustomed to defiance, was enraged. He grabbed her arm and tried to pull her inside, but she resisted. The struggle escalated quickly. Singh, a man known for his temper, grabbed a cutlass from the corner of the room. In a fit of rage, he attacked. The first blow struck Anjali's arm as she tried to protect herself. The second landed on her side. Her small frame fell to the floor, but Singh didn't stop. By the time he was done, Anjali's lifeless body lay in a pool of blood. Singh realized what he had done, but instead of remorse, he acted out of fear. He dragged her body out to the backyard of his compound, where he dug a shallow grave under the cover of darkness. He buried her there, erasing any evidence of the crime. To the villagers, Anjali had simply disappeared. When Anjali didn't return home the next morning, her parents grew worried. They waited, hoping she might arrive later in the day, but she never came. By nightfall, their worry turned to panic. They visited Singh's house, asking if he had seen her. Singh, calm and composed, lied to their faces. "She didn't come here yesterday," he said, dismissing them and asking them to leave. The Sharmas, desperate to find their daughter, reported her missing to the police. Their last hope was the local police, but Rampur was not a place where justice came easily. Raghunath Singh's influence extended far beyond his property. He controlled not only the land and the people, but also the very system meant to uphold the law. The Sharmas approached the police station, pleading with officers to help find their missing daughter. The response was indifferent at best. Officers noted the complaint but showed no urgency. Some even hinted that Singh's name should not be involved, suggesting they look elsewhere for answers. Days passed and the family grew more desperate. Each night, they returned home empty-handed, only to wake up and start the search again. The villagers, too afraid of Singh's wrath, avoided them. Even those who had seen or heard suspicious things kept quiet, fearing what might happen if they spoke out. It was on the 6th day that a glimmer of hope appeared. A security guard who worked for Singh approached the Sharmas in secret. He had watched everything unfold, the argument, the attack, and the burial. For days his conscience had weighed on him, but fear of Singh kept him silent. Now seeing the family's anguish, he could no longer keep the truth hidden. He told them what he had witnessed. Anjali had been murdered and buried in Singh's backyard. The Sharmas took this information to the police. Armed with this critical lead, they demanded action. Reluctantly, the officers began their investigation, but even then, progress was slow. Singh's estate was well guarded, and gaining access to it was no simple task. Villagers loyal to Singh tried to block the investigation, spreading rumors to discredit the family's claims. Some said Anjali had run away, while others insisted the Sharmas were trying to frame Singh out of spite. The resistance made it clear that Singh's grip on the village was still strong. The police finally secured a warrant and launched a raid on Singh's property. The atmosphere was tense as officers entered his estate, navigating through layers of security and resistance from his household staff. Singh himself remained calm, dismissing the investigation as baseless. But the truth was buried deep, literally. In the backyard of Singh's compound, officers began digging. After hours of searching, they uncovered a shallow grave. Inside lay Anjali's body, wrapped in a cloth. The discovery sent shockwaves through the village. The girl everyone had searched for was gone, and the truth of her final moments was more horrifying than anyone had imagined. But the investigation didn't end there. As police continued their search, they found more evidence. Journals, photographs, and records that pointed to a pattern of abuse. Over the years, Singh had brought other girls into his household under similar arrangements. Some had disappeared without explanation. Others had fled the village, leaving behind their families and everything they knew. Testimonies began to surface, and the full extent of Singh's crimes became clear. The once powerful leader of Rampur was now the focus of an investigation that threatened to expose decades of corruption and abuse. The villagers who had once feared him now began to whisper about justice. The walls of Singh's empire were crumbling, one revelation at a time. What would you do if you found out someone you trusted had committed such heinous crimes? Let us know in the comments. Raghunath Singh had ruled Rampur with unchecked power for decades. His actions were driven by greed, lust, and an insatiable desire for control. For him, wealth and influence were not enough. He sought domination over every aspect of the villagers' lives. Singh's motives became clearer with each piece of evidence uncovered. He saw the vulnerable as tools to be exploited, whether it was for their land, labor, or, in Anjali Sharma's case, their innocence. His manipulation extended beyond monetary gain. It was about exerting authority and satisfying his perverse desires without question. But Singh's actions raise an important question. Was he acting alone? The scale and duration of his crimes suggest that others may have played a role, even if indirectly. Singh's household staff, for instance, had witnessed his treatment of young girls over the years. While some, like the security guard, eventually spoke out, others remained silent. Was it fear that kept them quiet, or were they complicit in enabling his crimes? The villagers, too, had their share of secrets. Many had known of Singh's ways but chose not to intervene. Some claimed they were too afraid, while others benefited from his favoritism. The security guard's testimony provides a unique perspective. He had worked closely with Singh, witnessing the abuse firsthand. His decision to come forward was not easy. Speaking out against a man as powerful as Singh meant risking his own safety, his livelihood, and the well-being of his family. Yet, his conscience outweighed his fear. He became the key to uncovering the truth. But his bravery also raises questions. Could others in Singh's circle have come forward sooner? If they had, could Anjali's life have been spared? This case forces us to confront the complexity of power and complicity. While Singh was the perpetrator, the system that allowed him to operate remained unchallenged for years. The villagers' silence, the local authorities' inaction, and the complicity of those around him all contributed to the tragedy. Do you think Singh acted alone, or were there others helping him? Comment your thoughts below. After the harrowing discovery of Anjali Sharma's body and the mounting evidence against Raghunath Singh, the once untouchable village head was finally arrested. It was a sight that most villagers never thought they would witness. Singh, a man who had commanded fear and respect for decades, being escorted out of his grand compound in handcuffs. He maintained his composure, refusing to acknowledge the gravity of his crimes, as though convinced that his power and influence would protect him once again. The police wasted no time building a case. The security guard's testimony was the first piece of the puzzle, providing a detailed account of what had happened that fateful night. But as the investigation continued, more horrifying details emerged. In Singh's compound, officers uncovered records, photographs, and personal belongings of other young girls who had been lured into his home over the years. These discoveries painted a disturbing picture of a man who had systematically abused his position to exploit those who trusted him. What truly broke the case wide open were the voices of other victims. Young women who had been too afraid to speak out for years now found the courage to come forward. They described similar experiences, being coerced into working for Singh under the guise of helping their families, enduring abuse, and being threatened into silence. Some had escaped, leaving their families behind to avoid further harm, while others had suffered quietly, believing there was no way out. Their stories were a testament to the pain and fear Singh had inflicted on the most vulnerable members of the community. The testimonies, combined with the physical evidence, left no room for doubt. Singh was charged with multiple counts, including murder, sexual abuse, exploitation, and coercion. His trial began amidst widespread attention, not just in Rampur but across the region. For a village that had lived in the shadow of Singh's power for so long, seeing him face justice was both surreal and emotional. People gathered outside the courthouse each day, discussing the case and sharing their own stories of how 𝐬𝐮 had ruled their lives. Inside the courtroom, 𝐬𝐮's demeanor remained unchanged. He denied the charges, claiming that the accusations were fabricated by those who envied his position. His defense team attempted to discredit the witnesses, particularly the security guard, by suggesting that he had ulterior motives. But the overwhelming evidence could not be ignored. Piece by piece, the prosecution dismantled 𝐬𝐮's image of authority and respect, revealing the true nature of his actions. The 𝐟𝐸𝐺 family's presence in the courtroom became a powerful symbol of resilience. Anjali's parents, still consumed by grief, sat quietly as the details of her final moments were recounted. Her mother often clutched a small photograph of Anjali, while her father stared ahead, his expression a mix of sorrow and determination. They had lost their youngest daughter, but they were determined to ensure that her death would not be in vain. The impact of the case extended far beyond the courtroom. In Rampur, the villagers began to question the very structure of their community. 𝐬𝐮 had been the leader for so long that most had accepted his authority without question. Now, they were forced to confront the consequences of that acceptance. Many felt guilt for their silence, wondering if speaking out earlier could have prevented Anjali's death or the suffering of so many others. Conversations about leadership reform and accountability became common as the community grappled with the need for change. But change did not come easily. Some villagers, particularly those who had benefited from 𝐬𝐮's favoritism, resisted the idea of reform. They argued that 𝐬𝐮's removal would create chaos, leaving the village without direction. Others feared that speaking too openly could make them targets, even with 𝐬𝐮 in custody. The atmosphere in Rampur was tense, a mixture of hope for justice and uncertainty about the future. For the 𝐟𝐸𝐺's, life would never be the same. Anjali's death left a void that could not be filled. Her parents struggled with guilt, replaying every decision that had led to her being sent to 𝐬𝐮's house. Her siblings, too young to fully understand the complexities of the situation, carried the weight of her absence in their own way. The family's grief was compounded by the knowledge that they were not alone. There were other families in the village who had suffered similar losses, their pain hidden in silence. This case forces us to ask difficult questions. How do we prevent those in power from abusing their authority? What responsibility do we bear when we remain silent in the face of injustice? But justice is about more than one man's conviction. It's about ensuring that the system which allowed 𝐬𝐮 to operate is changed. It's about creating an environment where families like the 𝐟𝐸𝐺's are never forced to make impossible choices. And it's about asking ourselves how we as a society can prevent such tragedies from happening again. What does this case say about society and accountability? How can we ensure that power is not misused and that those in need are protected? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to support our work and hear more real-life stories like Anjali's. Your support helps us keep bringing these untold stories to light. Tell us in the comments what you think about this case and share any other stories you'd like us to cover. Next time, we'll uncover another case of power and betrayal that will leave you questioning everything. Don't miss it.